What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Just Joe BTS. If yesterday's video was for the girls, something I actually heard from a couple of you, then today's video is for all these guys out there. Today, we're going to be talking about Gladiator.
The gods have spoken!
Alright, so I just saw Gladiator last night in theaters in IMAX. It was pretty great. I actually gave it the same Letterboxd rating that I gave to Wicked. And the reason for that is I think I enjoyed both movies equally, which is kind of unheard of for me, especially watching movies back to back. Take, for instance, Barbie and Oppenheimer. Barbie was a complete waste of money, and Oppenheimer was one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. So Gladiator 2 is directed by Ridley Scott, same guy that directed the first Gladiator movie, which is partially why I was really excited about this as a sequel. It's always great to see the same director returning to make a sequel. Usually when you're in that scenario, it means that the director is very passionate about their work. They really liked the first one. They had more to tell. They knew there was more to tell, and they returned. It's usually not for a cash grab. Now, if it is for a cash grab, you'll get something like Joker 2, which we saw earlier this year, which was absolute garbage for a sequel. Everyone said Todd Phillips is talented. I actually don't think he is. I think Todd Phillips is a hack and got lucky on one project. So if you don't agree with me, I'll see you in the comments. All right, I'm getting myself distracted. So we're going to break down our 5 categories for this movie, same as any other movie. I'm actually going to add a 6th one in, and that's going to be writing. All right, starting off, we've got number 1, which is directing. Now, the directing in this movie, once again, Ridley Scott, coming back to direct the sequel in this case. I think Ridley Scott is very talented. A lot of people don't like him. There's a lot of naysayers, and really, that's what happens when you direct 1 or 2 movies so well that then people will nitpick everything in every other movie. Just because you're making movies that are maybe average for everyone else, and any other filmmaker making a movie of that caliber would just be lucky. But not everyone can stick the landing on every single movie. See any major director. Even Christopher Nolan, people have said that he's missed. So if movies are an art form, directing is being the artist behind the movie. Yes, there's actors and everything else, but directing really is the artist speaking. And I think that's very important to remember when you watch this movie. I watched a review of this movie that was just a hatchet job on it. Really disappointed. I'll say who it was. It was Jeremy Johns. I usually love his reviews. But in this case, he just kept comparing this movie to the original, which is really hard not to do, especially when you have an original that's as iconic as Gladiator. But the problem is you need to approach every sequel as a new movie. It's not a continuation unless it says part 2, like what we'll get with Wicked here in a couple months. Unless it's a part 2, it's a new movie. It's a new story, and it should be treated as a new story. All right, now that I've gotten all of my personal opinions out there, let's get back to our 5 rankings. All right, so for directing, Ridley Scott really steers this movie very nicely. He makes it familiar in the first half of the movie to the point where if you haven't seen the first Gladiator in maybe a couple years or something like that, a couple months, you can draw those connections. You can kind of figure out where it's going, what's happening. And then in the second half, he makes this a brand new movie. It's completely different from anything you've seen before, and it's really exciting. You don't know which character to root for. You don't know who's going to be good, who's going to be bad. There's a lot of fun politics. There's a lot of things going on here that are very different from the first movie. People like what's familiar, but true innovation comes with change, and I think in this case, Ridley Scott chose the right thing by deciding to make a new movie. Make something that's familiar in the first half, make something that's different in the second half. And I really applaud that choice. So for directing, I'm going to give Ridley Scott an 8 out of 10. All right, next up we have acting. Now, I was driving home from watching this movie and thinking about who really stood out to me. Obviously, Paul Mescal. I'm saying that wrong, I'm sure. But he's fantastic as a lead. He's a good anchor point in this movie. He's a good person to follow. Pedro Pascal really is not as big of a character in this movie as I was expecting him to be. For a movie of this caliber, Pedro dialed it in. I was a little disappointed in his performance. I wanted him to, be bigger, be more on screen than what he was. I was a little disappointed in that because I know he has more in him as an actor. I think that on a movie of this scale, you really need to be big and bold and you need to stand out. You're in a massive A-list cast. You're in a huge movie. It pays to be big, and Pedro just felt small. What I ultimately arrived at for my favorite actor in this is Denzel Washington. He is the standout in this movie. He defines this movie. He is the reason you'll remember this movie. You're not going to remember Pedro. You're not going to remember Paul Mescal. You're not going to remember Joseph Quinn. They're all great as supporting actors, but really the person that stands out in your brain when you think about this movie is Denzel Washington. Everything from his energy to his voice inflections to his timing, whether that be comedic timing, dramatic timing, anything like that, he's just mesmerizing to watch. Now, that's not really a surprise coming from Denzel Washington. We all know he's fantastic, very talented. I was really impressed that even with this big career that he's had in acting, everyone knows him to be fantastic. It's like Pedro Pascal. He could have dialed it in, but he didn't. He really discovered his character and brought the right energy to that character to where I'm going to give Denzel Washington the best actor in this movie. So for acting mainly carried by Denzel Washington here in this one, I'm going to give them a strong 8 out of 10 as well. All right, next up on this list is cinematography. Now for cinematography, I was actually a really big fan of it in this movie. I think that they did a nice job of really immersing you in the action while also stepping back sometimes to show just the grand spectacle that is the Colosseum. The ship fight was one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. I just thought that cinematography-wise, they really nicely immersed you in the action while also still giving you those wide shots, those wide angles to where you can really take in the beauty of Rome, the spectacle of the Colosseum, everything around you, and you really feel like you are in Rome when you're watching this movie. I'm going to give the cinematography in this movie a solid 7 out of 10. Next up, we have sound. The sound in this movie, you kind of see a glimpse of it in the trailer. I'll play it right here. Where the overall audio cuts back and all you hear are the sword whooshes and clangs and everything like that. And I just loved that. It gave you that last little bit of the gritty immersion that you need to buy into this movie, to feel like you are in the movie. You're feeling the fight. At one point during one of these fight scenes, I felt like it was just me who felt like really into the movie. And I turned to my left, and of course, it's only guys in the theater, but turned to my left, and there's all these old guys sitting in their seats, just leaning forward with their fists clenched. And I was like, yep. Everyone else is feeling this moment too. It's really cool when a movie can immerse a whole crowd of 50 plus people in an action sequence to the point where they feel like they're going to jump up and fight too. I just thought it was really cool. Now, as music is part of the sound category, really didn't think the music was anything special. The best parts of the score of this movie are going to be the parts that echo the score of the original movie. It just doesn't have the same drama and tension that the original had. Overall, for sound, I'm going to give this movie a solid 7 out of 10. All right, last thing we have here is visual effects. Now, I did not do a ton of digging into the behind the scenes of this movie yet. The visual effects in it, you didn't notice. You didn't notice if there were visual effects or if there weren't, other than the sharks. The sharks kind of did not look that good, actually. I don't know. There was something about when they showed the sharks, it just pulled me out of the movie because they looked a little too fake in the wide angle shots where you see them swimming around. If you watch the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. There was just something off about them. I think you could tell it was artificial enough to where that just slightly pulled me out. Nothing bad, but where you realize you're watching a movie for a second. So the score I'm going to give this movie, mainly lower because of the sharks, is going to be a 5 out of 10. All right, lastly, I have writing. Now, I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier in this video, but the writing in this movie, I think, is not as good as the first. The writing in this movie needs to be viewed differently from the first Gladiator movie. The first Gladiator movie, you have these really strong monologues, these speeches that just stick with you. Very quotable. Anyone who's seen the first movie knows exactly what I'm talking about. This movie really didn't set out to outdo the first movie. It's not trying to one-up the first movie, which I think is a really wise choice. In this one, it's different. You're not getting those long monologues, but you're not following a character who has those long monologues. That doesn't mean that they're less important. They're not scripted as well, anything like that. There's a moment in this where our main character is called on to make a speech, and he doesn't know what to say. He's not a speaker. He's not a public speaker. He wasn't raised that way. All he's ever known is a much simpler life. He isn't a great general or a great emperor or anything like that. Realizing that really brought me a long way. And I think it's really important to remember that people are different. You know, one person who's maybe a great speaker and can rile up a crowd and is a great leader in that way, maybe is not the same as someone who leads purely by example. And it really settled in with me that it belongs that way. It's right that it's that way. It paints these characters in an authentic light, that they're not the exact same as everyone in the previous film. All right, so for writing in this movie, I'm going to actually give this a strong 7 out of 10 as well. Now, as always, you guys, movies break down into 2 camps for me. One is, will I watch it again? And 2 is, will I forget it and never see it again, never want to watch it again? In this case, this is definitely on my rewatch list. I'm really excited to see it again. I actually probably will see it again in theaters. Now, as always, this is just my opinion of the movie. I want to get your opinions, so please write in the comments below. Let me know if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, what you think about the movie. Have you seen Gladiator 2? And if so, what did you think about it? As always, everyone, I really appreciate the support. I'm always looking for more followers, more subscribers, and more thoughts. So please like this video, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what you'd like me to review next. Peace.
Calm down before you stress up the groove, the energy a little